Okay. I just hit record also. Okay, so what I'm going to go over with you guys today is Redux, which is a global state management, which is what you guys are going to start learning come next week. All right. I think you guys are kind of lucky with the amount of time that you guys have to learn it, because as in full time you only have like 3 days, and you guys have I think like 6 days to actually figure it out and learn it. So you guys are lucky. That being said, what I'm gonna attempt to teach you guys today, or at least to get through today, is to make this is with the superhero API, to be able to search for a superhero. I'll put Batman in here. Whenever you search it, and then Batman shows up, all the different Batmans. At this point, I only have their name and their picture. All right. That's the only thing that I've put together so far. I was doing this on my own just to make sure I wasn't going to have any hiccups whenever I was going through it with you guys. So, that being said, we can go ahead and get started. The first things you always do is you add your dependencies, right? In Code Sandbox, it's super easy, as you guys know. For Redux, the things that you need to install is Redux. That's one. Then there is also React Redux. And then two that make debugging in Redux really simple is Redux Logger, and then also Redux Thunk. All right. Now they're going to explain all of this to you next week as you go through this. They're going to tell you about these and give you more detail on what they're doing. The goal of what I'm doing today is not for you guys not to necessarily understand Redux in its entirety, but to have a better head going into it whenever you guys hit the class on Monday or Tuesday or whenever it is that you guys have your first lecture. All right. So that's my goal. So to start with Redux, what you always start with is you start with a store, or you have to create a store, right? So just like you created, like you wrap your app in your router whenever you did routing, right? You do the same thing for your store, right? But you have to create all that stuff. You have to create a store, and all a store does is it stores all of your state. This is one I created for. I'm gonna, let me close all of these down. Now this is kind of, because I'm going to show you guys exactly what it is. Can you guys see my VS Code? Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that you guys could actually see it. All right. So what you end up doing here is you end up creating, like bringing in your provider, your create store, and your applied middleware, because that's what Thunk and Logger is. Those are middleware. I don't know if you guys know what middleware does or what it is, but middleware goes in between your functions, right? So it happens in the middle of whatever is that you're doing, which is why it's called middleware. It, like in the middle of your functionality or in your program, that's where this happens, and it modifies the data somehow, or it checks the data. In our case, we just want it to, we're going to have it log all of the data. We're going to have it log absolutely everything that we do, so we can see exactly where our changes are coming from and how it's going to morph and change into the next thing, right? And that's really how Redux Logger comes into play, and it's an amazing tool, which I'll show you guys in a minute. So the first thing, everything kind of breaks as you're setting up your store. Everything kind of breaks, and till you get it all together, and then it kind of works again. So if you start seeing errors pop up on the screen, that's completely normal at this point, because we have to create all these things. Just like whenever you were doing your no routing, I don't think does that. But you'll see in a minute what I mean. Like everything's gonna start breaking, which is completely fine, and we'll get it all fixed. All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import our provider, like I was saying, and this is going to come from React Redux. React Redux is what is like the go between React and Redux, right? They were meant to work together, but that's kind of what bridges the two of them together, because not everything is provided in Redux that React needs to work with Redux. So that it has its own package, right? All right, so we bring in the provider. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna bring in the functionality that we need, or the hooks, so to speak, that we need. And this is gonna come straight from Redux, right? So we're gonna have create our store, and we're gonna also need to apply our middleware. And both of those are going to come from Redux. And I'll show you guys in just a second how that's actually going to work and how we actually work with those two tools. All right. And then from where I showed you guys that we had our Redux logger and our Redux thunk, now we're going to import, the first one is, I always do is thunk, and that's going to come from Redux thunk. And then the other one that I'm going to import is logger, and that's going to be from Redux logger. All right. And then now I think is where it kind of starts to break. Possibly, we'll find out. Every time I say something's going to break, it never does. But we're going to try to wrap our app in our provider. Let's see. So provider, and then put that down there. Okay, so so it is kind of breaking, but that's right. So now, all right, so now we have our app is wrapped in our provider, even though we don't have a store or anything else for it. All right, to create that store, we need to do a couple of things. And the first things you need to do is you need to create an actual store directory. It doesn't have to be named store, but it makes sense for it to be named store because it is a global state store, right? And that's where you're storing all of your global state. So we create that directory, and inside of this directory, there's two more directories. There's your actions directory, and then you're also going to have something that's called your reducers directory. All right. And then there's multiple ways to set up your reducer. I do it kind of in a way that makes it a scalable solution. So I created an index.js. And then I also create a reducer for the actual whatever it is that we're doing. Like in this case, it's going to be a superheroes reducer, because that's what it is that we're working with, is the superhero API. All right. So in the superhero reducer, to start, I'm just going to create in the reducer is where you actually create your state, right? So just like in useState, right, you always have an initial state. So the first thing that you create inside of your reducer is going to be your initial state. So in this case, we're going to call it initial state. I can never spell initial state. All right. And your state should always be an object. Remember this for future. State needs to be an object here. All right. Now you can do it with an array. You can do it as a string, but that's limiting yourself, and it's making it harder on yourself. If you make it an object, it's going to make it easier, and things are going to be able to be accessed easier, because how do we access things with an object? We can use dot notation, right? That's exactly how you want to be able to modify and interact with this in the future. The first thing here, I'm just going to put an is loading, and I'm just going to set this to false. That's going to be the initial state. That's all I'm going to set in there for now, is just this. All right. Now, the reducers file. How many of you guys have ever heard of a switch case statement? Okay. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing as an if else statement, except for it's written a little differently. And in this case, well, I mean, it's written the same no matter how you're doing it, but in this case, it's going to be to update your state, right? So this is where we're actually going to make our reducer, and we're going to export our reducer here. So export superheroes reducer. All right, and this is going to take in 2 arguments, all right, or 2 parameters here, and it's going to be your state, which is going to be set initially to your initial state, and I can never spell it right. initial state. And then the second thing it's going to take here is going to be an action. All right. And that action is also going to be an object, which I'll explain to you guys in a minute. All right. All right. The next thing that this is going to do here is then this is where we're going to start working with our state or with our switch. All right. So we're going to do a switch. And then we're going to have our action.type here. And then we're going to have our and then we're going to have our default here. I got lost for a second. You always want to start with your default because it'll keep it from breaking, right? And then if nothing else happens, like if it doesn't hit any of the other statements, then it's going to fall down to this one. All right. And all you're going to return here is your state. Return state. So this is the most basic. I don't need to return this. That might, let me find out. I still like these like little things here. I always like have issue. Nope. That should work. Export, because I didn't put a const here. See, little things, and that fixed everything. Okay, so now we have our very initial reducer, and this is the most basic switch statement and the most basic reducer that you can have. Is this right here? All right. I'm just gonna move that out of the way until we get the errors done. Okay, so this is the most basic. Now, probably asking why I put this index here, and that's because there's something called a combine reducers. So if you need more than one reducer, say we were working with superheroes and say we're working with Pokemon, we could have one reducer for our Pokemon and one reducer for our superheroes. In this case, we're only going to have one reducer, but I always use this combine reducers. That way, in the future, it's a scalable solution if I need to add another reducer in the future. So for this one, we're going to import. It's going to be called combine reducers. And that's going to come from Redux. Is it Redux or React Redux? I can never remember the two. I think it comes straight from Redux. Yeah, from Redux itself. All right. And then the only other thing that you have to import here is your actual reducer. So I'm going to import in the what did I name it in here? I'm just going to copy it because if not, I always get typos with this. All right. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to have this renamed. So I don't have to type out superheroes reducer a million times in the future. I'm just going to type it, make this SHR. All right. And then we're just going to import that in from our superheroes reducer.js file. All right. And then the last thing that you have to do inside of here, inside of your reducer, and then you're done with this part of your reducer, is you have to export this out. So export default combine reducers. This is where you create your whole reducer, which is going to be an object also. All right. So, and then I'm just going to call this SHR. So I'm exporting out my superheroes reducer. All right. So what this means is I'm exporting out this file here, which currently this file is nothing but this initial state. All right. It doesn't do anything else, and there's no actions for it to actually be calling to do anyway yet. Anyway. All right. Now we need to go back to our index.js file though, because we need to create that store using that reducer. The reason why I paused from this file and went to my reducer file is because you have to have a reducer created to import a reducer in. All right. Which is what I'm going to end up having to do here. That way I can create the store. So I'm just going to import, and I'm going to call it root reducer, root reducer. And then I'm going to import this in from the store's reducer file. And that's all I have to type. That's the reason why the index.js file here in reducers is, I like that way better, is because now I'm not importing this in from any specific file name. I'm importing it in from the directory itself, and it'll pull it all in for me. All right. Sorry. Oh, but I would do this all the time. I don't need that around that. It just needs to be a root reducer. All right. So the next step that you have to do is actually creating the store with everything that we've already brought in now. Now we have to create that store. All right. So we're going to say const store equals, we're going to use our create store hook. All right. And then we're going to pass in our root reducer. And then we're also going to pass in our apply middleware. Apply middleware. And then this is actually a function that we're going to pass in our two middleware that we want to use, which is our thunk and our Redux logger. All right. So we're going to put thunk here, and then I'm going to put logger afterwards. And then this is going to set up our store for us. And then all we have to do is pass that into the provider. So we have store equals, and then we're going to pass in our store. And now we have our initial state is completely set up. See, if you notice, all of our errors went away, and now it's back to showing us just the generic app file, right? So all of that, everything I just went through was just the basics of setting up Redux. There's quite a bit to that. All right. There's a bunch of steps to that. And it takes repetition after, like, it takes doing it a lot of times to figure all of that stuff out. All right. So if you don't understand it right away, ask questions. All right. If you need help, ask for help. All right. Does anybody need me to explain anything that I've gone through so far before I continue? Feel free to, let me open up the, I don't even know how to get to the chat now. There we go. Feel free to send a message in the Zoom chat if you guys need, there we go. If you guys need any help with anything. All right. All right. So the next step, if there's no questions there, and don't send them in Slack because I'm not checking Slack. I have that closed, just FYI. All I have is the Zoom chat open. Because if you guys don't know me, I do get distracted easily. I think some of my students that I've had since the beginning can attest to that. Like, I get distracted super easy. So, all right. So moving on to the next piece. The next piece is actually starting to do something, to build something out. What I'm going to use today for the purposes of this is the superhero API, which I can send you guys a copy to this. I'll send it into the Zoom chat. That's the API that we're going to use to store stuff and to do things to display information. All right, for today. Now, the way that their API is set up is you have to have a token, which you can get by logging in with your Facebook. You can get an access token, which you need the access token to do everything. I can zoom into here a little bit so you guys can see. So you can do searches by their ID, power stats, biography, appearance, work, connections, image, or you can search by name. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search by name. That's how I'm going to show you guys, and what I'm going to show you guys is searching by name. All right. So their documentation is pretty good. It explains to you exactly what you need to do. So like down here, search by name, it's just a get request, and then it returns the characters. Well, if you do just that, it returns that, but we want search and name. All right, so that's what we're doing. That being said, we also need to install our, did I install? Yeah, okay. We also need to install Axios. Because we're going to use Axios to do our Axios calls to get that information back. All right. So first things first, let's create another directory in here that is going to be for our components. All right. And the first thing I'm going to make is I'm going to make a search form, because how can you search if you don't have a search form, right? So search form.jsx. I'm going to try to make this quickly. It should be fairly quick for me to create create, but so we're going to import React, and we're also going to import useState. Okay. From React. And then I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna import a function here, or a thing here called connect, which is how you connect to the state store. That's how you connect to Redux. That's how you connect to all of it, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna do that from, I want to say it's React Redux. I'm fairly positive it's React Redux. I could probably look real quick so I don't make a fool out of myself later on. It is React Redux. All right. So I'm going to create a function. I'm just going to call it search form. I'm going to go ahead and pass in props here. And you guys will see why in a minute. And then I'm going to go and create my state or my use state object. That's another thing that I need to point out to you guys is if you're using a form, your form should still be handled with local state. So your form should still be handled with something like use state. All right. So I'm gonna say const, and then I'm just gonna make this a search and a set search. It's gonna be use state, and then this is just gonna be an empty string. All right. And then I'm going to return. And then I'm just gonna, I guess I can do a div here. I'll do class name search. Alrighty. All right. Should I make this really generic? So form. All right, so label is gonna HTML4. All right, and then this is gonna be an input where the type is gonna be text, ID equals search, name equals search, value is going to equal search. And then I hate whenever it does that, but it's all right. Do this, and then there we go. And then the last thing we need to do here is we need to have an on change, which is going to break our stuff because we haven't defined an on change yet, but that's all right. So on change, I'm just going to put that for now. All right. And then I'm also going to give us a button, which is going to be search / button. All righty. And then, okay. Oh, I still need to export all of this out now, right? What am I missing here? Something doesn't like something. That should be this div here has a closing div. That form has a closing form. Oh, that's why my label does not have a closing label. There we go. All right. So this is where our connect function is going to come into play. And I'll kind of explain more of it in a little bit, but this is where it's going to come into play. Here, just like you always have, you have to export this component just like everything else. But in the case of this, you're going to export it with the connect function, right? The connect function is what's going to allow you to connect everything. And there's two sets of parentheses here that you're going to use, all right? The first one is where you're going to have something that you're going to call map state to props, which I'm going to create in just a second. All right. And then the second thing that goes in this first set of parentheses is going to be an object. And this is for any functions that you need that's going to come from your actions file. In this case, we're going to have one. We just haven't created it yet because we haven't got to that part of the functionality yet, right? So we'll have that, just not right this second. And the next thing that you have to do here in the second set of parentheses is where you actually put the name of your component. So in this case, it's search form. So that's where search form comes out. All right. And now, like I said, now you'll see where this props comes into play. Because I'm going to create a map state to props, and then I'm going to pass into it state. All right. And then this is going to return to me a state object. All right. So if I return an object here, now in our reducer, we created our initial state of is loading, right? That's the only thing that we have in our state right now is loading. So if I put in here, which I'm going to have to import, let me go ahead and import this into app.js. I'm going to put this here. Yeah, and then I'm going to put my search form there. There we go. All right. So that should put, okay, so that puts my form at the very top up here, and that's going to connect me to everything. That way it is going to break it, or it should allow me to actually show maybe my console. Let me clear that out. Clear. All right. So now I'm going to, let's see, is loading is something we have, right? So is loading state.shr.is. All right. So let me see if I can console log my state here. Console.log map state to props. And then I'm just gonna make this state, and let's see what happens. All right. So I don't know if you guys can see this. I'll try to make it as big as I can for you guys to see it. Now, going back all the way back into our reducer file, right? I exported out my superheroes reducer. I imported it into my index.js file, and I imported it in as superheroes reducer, and then I changed it to SHR, right? So my state now has an SHR in it because that's my superheroes reducer. If you notice, this state that is now connected to has an SHR object here. All right. And that SHR object is loading. All right. So the state that you set up in your reducer file is what's going to get passed into your map state to props function, no matter where you call it at. Right. So here, that's in our search form, we have this. We have our state.shr.is loading. And if I console log here, if I come in here and I console log, now that I have that set up, I'm just going to console log this is props, right? If I console log props here, now you see that we have an is loading, and that's false. All right. So now anything that I have in my reducer file, which I'll show you, like if I go back to my reducers file here, nope, not there, this one. And if I add something else in here, let's say I add an is error, and I'll just give that a false, and I'll give a error for in the future. I'm sure we're going to have an error message at some point. And then I'm going to give us a superheroes, and that's going to be an array. And then I'm going to go ahead and give us because I want to be able to save my searches, right? So I'm just going to give myself a searches array. That way I can save whatever searches in the future. Now, something doesn't like, that's my on change. I'm going to show you guys now that I've added all of these right here, right? And my map state to props, my SHR object now has all of those things in it. It's all there, and I can access it from any file that I have a connect function in. All right. So what this allows you to do is this allows you to get rid of and stop prop drilling. There's no need to pass props. If everything is able to be accessed from everywhere, there's no need to pass props, right? For prop drilling and for anything like that. So the biggest piece that we have left that we have to create, which I just have to zoom out of this just a little bit because I can't see anything. There we go. Oh, that might have been too far. Come on. There we go. All right. So the next thing that we have to do is I need to get rid of all of this right here, and I'm going to call this, we have our search. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm just going to call this superheroes. Heroes, right? All right. And then I will get rid of this because we don't want that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in, if it's not there already, I'm going to bring in React Router DOM. Because I want to be able to access all of my, no, not string query. That's not what I wanted. React Router DOM. That's the one. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and also wrap my whole thing here inside of my router, which I know I still need to import that in, but let's see, router. All right. And then I will import my browser router as router from React Router DOM. All right. And then we have our router. All right. So what I'm going to do now is, because I have a is loading state, right? So I'm going to go ahead and connect my app here to my state store, because currently it's not connected, right? So the only thing currently that can access that state is search form. But as soon as, which I need to pass props in here, all right, but as soon as I import connect, I just had this one. Is it Redux? I think so. All right. So as soon as we bring in connect here, and then I'm going to take out this default here, and I'm going to put this at the bottom, just like we do for everything else, right? I'm going to take out this here also. All right. So export default connect. And then app is going to go in here, and then we need to create our map state to props. So const. So every file that you want to be able to access your props in your state, you also need to create this map state to props function. All right. It's not a create one time and you have to, like, that's it. You have to create it for every file that you want to access your store in. You need to create that functionality. All right. So map state to props. And then once again, this takes in state, and it returns to you whatever state it is that you want. So return, not a fail, return. I'm just, for now, I'm going to do is loading, and this is going to be state.shr.isLoading. Is loading. All right. Redux. Okay, so this must be React Redux. There we go. That's it. All right. So then we're going to connect our map state to props here. Map state to props. That. Okie dokie. What is this? I'm not liking now. Export default connect. Oh, because I'm missing that. All right. So what questions do you guys have currently? Because I don't want to just keep right on chugging along if you guys have questions. Because if you're confused now, you're going to be confused later. And I want to make sure you guys aren't as confused as possible, if that makes any sense. So like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. If I can get it to show up on my screen. There we go. Oh, sorry. I totally just saw you guys just put this now. All right. So I have something shared by the on chains. Yeah, I'm just not, I appreciate that. I'm just not going to put in the an on change piece. I'm gonna slide this here. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but the question was about this about the on change. The only reason why I'm not putting something in here is because I'm just gonna type the whole thing out, and I'd rather see the error, because if I don't see the error, then I'm not gonna remember to go fix it. I'm not gonna remember to actually do the work. And so I'm gonna be trying to make it work, and I'm be confused as to why it's not working, because I'm not getting an error, so I'm not going to be able to find where my mistake is. That's the reason why I'm not doing that. Is there something specific you needed from my app.js file, Bill? I don't know if there's something specific you need. Let me know. Yes, Kavya, you're correct. The map state to props and the connect brings the props value to wherever you bring it in. So whether I create this here, whether I create it in my search form, whether I create another component, which I'm going to do in just a moment, you're like, all of that will be, you'll see that in just a minute. Am I going to have what's an am link for the code later? I mean, I can probably save this now. It should be saved. Well, here, I auto saved it now. I sent out a link inside of here before. At the very top of the Zoom chat, I can do it again. That should be the code to the sandbox link. I did not mean to send that to Bill. I want to send it to everyone. That should be a link to it. Okay, so where I come up with whether I'm going to use global state like Redux, or whether I'm going to use local state, is how many components need that state? Who and what needs that state? If it's just a form, then I'm going to use local storage, or not local storage. I'm going to use a local variable or a use state. If it's something to where I need different components, need different things from the same information, then I'm going to use a global state. Typically anything other than what you're gonna use for like a form or whatever, you're gonna want some sort of state management, unless it's just like an array of data. If it's like necessarily a simple array of data that's all you're going to use, then there's no real reason to have it. As you can see, like, this is a lot of work to set up just the small amount of management. But once you get it set up, it's easier to use, in my opinion. And in my opinion, it just makes things easier. And it's not, in my labs project for Lambda, I think we had like 7 or 8 components where we were drilled props all the way down. We did not use global state management. We drilled props, and it is ridiculous to try to trace that up. So if something isn't right, or if something's named stupid or whatever, then you have to trace that back. You have to be able to find that data and find the information where it's coming from. And if you have 9, 10 files that you have to go through to find that data, it makes it so much more difficult. Whereas a global state management solution like Redux, everything is managed in one place, and you only have to worry about it going from this place to this place, versus how many places it had to go to get to wherever you are. So that's really what I would say is the difference of how to figure out whether you're going to use it or not. Any other questions at this point? Okay. All right. So at this point, the only thing we've done is set up our store, create a single search box, and map our is loading to our app and map our pretty much everything. Well, no, just our is loading to this also. Okay, so I'm going to, I'm going to do this just so I can show you guys. I'm going to change the initial state for is loading to true, just so I can show you guys how you get around certain things. So now I have this. There we go. All right, so I'm not even worried about all that because that's mon change. We're good. All right, so I'm going to put here, and I'm going to say a props dot is loading question mark, right? So I'm checking to see whether props dot is loading is true. Then I'm going to give it an H1 that says loading with 3 little dots or an ellipses, and then I'm going to give it our closing H1 tag. If it's not true, then I'm going to give it an empty JSX tag. All right. So being that it's loading, because I have this set to loading, now it's going to do this, right? So now I say I don't want this to load, right? I want this to change from loading almost immediately. All right. I'm going to use a it's called a use dispatch. But let's do this. Just a second, y'all. Okay. So I'll leave that to true. All right, so I'm going to change this here, this action type. I'm going to create a case here. So our first case is going to just to stop this from loading. Just to change that real fast, all right? So the first thing we're going to do is case, and then this is going to be I'm just going to call it is loaded, all right? And then what I want to change here, and it's part of my state, what I want to change is I just want is loading to go to false. All right. So if you notice what I'm doing here, to update state, right? To update any of the state, all I'm doing is I made a case for it, which I'll show you how I access this case in a second, but I made a case for it, and then I returned what I want changed. The only thing I want to change in this state right now is this is loading. All right. So if I come back into my app.js, I will use I'm going to do this and see if I can console.log. Maybe I can, I might be able to, if I console like props here. Because I just want to show you guys how it gets changed, well, no, that's why I have Redux Thunk there. Don't even worry about what I was doing, because you'll see how the middleware helps in just a second. All right, so I'm going to import in our use dispatch, which is going to allow us to dispatch an action directly to our store. All right, so use dispatch from React Redux. I believe that's where it's going to come from. And then just like whenever you were doing routing, right? How you had your use, what was it? Use history, right? It's the same thing you do here. So const, I'm just going to call this dispatch, is going to be use dispatch. I think I spelled that right. That hopefully will work. Yeah, we'll find out. All right. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the use effect, right? So I'm just going to, let me bring in use effect. Use effect. Why did I do it that way? All right. So the first thing I want to do is use effect, and then use effect always takes a callback, and then it takes an empty in there. All right, so I'm gonna have it dispatch, and then I'm just gonna have it dispatch that action. The action that I created, which was the is loaded, correct? That's what I made it. It should be in here. Yes, it is loaded. So in here, I'm just gonna have it, the type is going to be is loaded. And let's see what that does. Dispatch is not a function. Why do you hate me so? Dispatch is not a function. Maybe it const dispatch. Dispatch. Okay. If you notice now, it's not loading anymore. Right? So if I take this out, I'm going to do that. And then this right here is going to refresh. Eventually. And you see how it's loading, right? Because my initial state is true. So if I put this use effect in, which dispatches whatever I want it to dispatch, it now took off that loading. So if I look down here, is loading is now false. Everybody see what I did there? Can you use Redux with a database? So databases are made, are interacted with via like a RESTful API or some sort of an API call, or SQL or MySQL or something to that effect. So I think the answer is no. I don't think you can use it with database. It's not meant for that. It's meant to manage your state here. So there's no data persistence with Redux at all. That's not what Redux is for. So if you refresh your page, it's going to refresh your information, just like if you're using useState or something to that effect. Dispatch looks at the is loaded. Yes. So whatever type you make your dispatch, right? So see how this has a previous state, an action, and an next state? I don't know why it's not actually showing what it's supposed to be. If this was in Chrome, it would show you all of that. So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, so it looks in your reducer. Oh, that's not gonna do it that way. It looks in your reducer and it says, okay, what's this case? So if it doesn't find that case, then it's gonna return the default. All right. So let's see what happens if I let's put is loaded 2. I don't think that's gonna, like, that should not do anything to this. If I do this, that should keep it going. Like, it's not going to change anything because this is not a type that exists inside of our thing. Yeah, see, it's still going because this doesn't exist. All right. So yes, Kavya, to answer your question, that's exactly what it's doing. Is it's looking at that case or the switch case statement to make it do whatever it's supposed to do. All right. But we don't need that necessarily because we don't do that kind of, we're not going to use that kind of stuff here. At least not something so simple like that. So I'm going to get rid of this also. And then you guys will see an actual use case for that kind of stuff in just a second. This is where my methodology of how to use Redux, I think, is important. All right. Because now we're actually going to start working in the actions file and the reducers file to make everything kind of work, to make everything kind of show up. All right. That being said, I'm going to create an index.js file inside of my actions. Because just like the name suggests, the actions file is going to be where we manipulate all the data. We do our Axios calls. We modify that data and we dispatch all of our state objects and actions. All right. So now let's see. We have first thing I'm going to do is import Axios from Axios. And I'm going to create an on or like an on submit. That way, whenever we submit this, we'll get data back, right? So function, well, we need to export. So export to const submit search. All right, and the same thing, this is going to take a search keyword, whatever search we send it. And then return dispatch. Get out of there. I always get that part. It's kind of screwy too, but let's see. Oh, I actually did that part right this time. All right, and then this is where we do everything. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dispatch an event, which I'm just going to title. You always want to do three things. You want to do a start, a success, and a failure, right? So the first one is going to be, I'm just going to call it search success. Search SUCC, or I'm sorry, the first one's going to be start. You always got to start before you can have success. So search start, right? And there's no payload to this. So there's nothing being changed. Well, there will be. If we want to save our searches, there will be. So I will. So payload here is search. All right. And this search term is whatever we pass into it. Now, I said earlier that your action is an object, right? Whenever we're looking at the reducer, I said our actions right here is an object. Here we have action.type. And this second, we need action.payload, right? So my methodology for Redux is this. You always need three things open whenever you're working with Redux. You need your actions file, you need your reducer, and then you need whatever component is that you're actually working out of. You need all of those open at the same time. The number one way people get confused and start messing up whenever it comes to Redux is having to flip back and forth, and they get lost on what page they're on, or what component they're working out of, or where their whatever is they're trying to get to, right? So in here, now I have my actions file here and my reducers file here. So every time I create a dispatch, then I need to create a case for that dispatch, because I know there's something going to be updated based on whatever this dispatch is. Otherwise, I wouldn't be creating a dispatch, right? So in this case, the start, I'm going to update a couple of things here. Not a dispatch. I'm going to update a couple of things here. So case here, it's got to match whatever this type is. All right. So this case here is going to be search start. All right. And then I'm going to want to return an updated state object. So I need to spread open my state. And then my is loading, I'm going to change to false, because it's no, or in this case, it's going to be true. Is loading is true because it's searching or it's trying to do something. So in the start, I'm going to make this true. And by default, this right here needs to be false. There we go. So I'm going to make this true. I'm going to add my search term or my payload. I'm going to add that to my history of searches, right? So my searches, think back at how you worked with class components and how you update state in that, right? So I can spread open this state. It's an array. I can spread it open, and I can add my new one to the end of it. So spreading open searches, but this is state.searches, and I'm adding my action.payload to the end of it. All right. Action.payload is whatever I send over, which in this case is going to be this search. All right. The next thing, now that I have my search, that's all I need for my search to start, right? That's all it has to be. So now I'm going to do my Axios call. So my Axios.get, I'm going to just pull this from here. Let's see. All right, so I'm gonna put this in here. But make sure you do your backticks here, because this is gonna end up having to be a I can never think of the name of it. But you're gonna end up having to use put variables in here, right, for your search. And I'm going to just copy and paste this over. So you got, for now, for the purposes of today, if you want, or tomorrow, feel free to use this API key. I'm going to cancel it after this is, after this week anyway, but all right, and then for this API is search, and then this ends up being, we want to pass in our search term here, right? And then we're going to, well, after we do our that, then we have a dot then, and then we're going to get a response, and we're going to want to console log that response, right? That's the first thing you should always do, is console log your response, so you know what your response is. And then the same thing, you end up needing a dot catch. In case you get an error, then you need to be able to console log that error also. Okie dokie. So, but currently we have no way to access this submit search function, right? Well, it's partially correct. In our form here, let me move this right here out of the way. So in our form up here, we can bring in this submit search function. So if I come in here and I say import, this is going to be submit search. I'm just going to import this in from our actions file. So this here should be store slash, or hold on, this right here should be 2 periods. Store slash actions, right? So that's what this thing right here is for. This curly brackets here is where we need to pass in the same submit search. So anytime that you want to use an action, you have to import it in here, and you also have to connect it down here, right? So if you notice now in props, it shows up as a function, right? So to use that, if I call props dot, like in here, I'm going to give myself an on submit. I'm going to do this and pass E, because we always need an event. All right, I'm going to say e.prevent default. And then I'm also going to do props dot submit search. And then I'm going to pass in our search value, which currently our search value is nothing more than empty quotes, because we still haven't created our on change yet. So let me do that real quick, and const on change, or we'll call this handle change equals event, and then set search to event dot target, event dot target dot value. All right, and then I'm just going to change this here to change. All right, so now if so far, if I've done everything correct, what should happen now is, as soon as I hit this submit button, as soon as I hit search, then I should get some sort of a response back from this API. All right, so I'm going to try to type in Superman and see what I get back. Oh, I get some sort of a network error. It doesn't, something didn't like something. Handle error access, It doesn't like, what does it not like? Axios create error. Dot get response. Why am I getting an error here? So search. This is, yeah, that's correct. What does it not like? Oh, hold on. What is this? What is That should be correct. Props.submit search and then search. Well, let me see what search is here. Console.log search. Let's see what that is. Yeah, so that got this. So that got the right thing. So props.submit search. Axios.get HTTP. Yep. Network error. Create error. Superman is definitely a thing. And it is a GET request. That's correct here. All right, hold on, let me see. I'm gonna copy this whole thing real quick and make sure that I didn't get something wrong here. So if I do this, and then if I take this out and put, yeah, see, that worked. There should be correct. Dot then. Why is it giving me a network error? The functionality itself is working. I hate using Code Sandbox. So that's a backtick and that's a backtick. That's correct. If anybody sees what's wrong, let me know. I don't see what's wrong, and I don't know why. Console log error dot message, and let's see what happens then. Just network error. Maybe because I was getting a CORS error before when I was trying to do it, and that may be the same thing I'm getting now as a CORS error. So let me see. I was getting this earlier. Let's see. Nope, still getting network error. Oh, do I need to put slash there, don't I? Oh, there we go. So that's what it was. It was a CORS error. We're good now. All right. So if you notice, I searched for Superman and now I got an object back. Response.data dot, I think it's results is what it ends up being. Yeah, results. All right. So then now I know results. Here's the problem though, which I only know this because I was doing this earlier. Say if I try to put an E at the end of this, right? There's no such thing as super main. So whenever I hit search, I still get a 200 okay back though. So I still get a successful message saying that the search was successful. The way that they have their API set up is if it's an incorrect search, like if there's nobody by that name, then you get a response that says error. Okay. So you have to think about that. You have to really look at the data, and you have to play around with the data and stuff when you're doing this. So what I ended up doing here, because what ended up making sense to me was I did this. I said, so if there's a response.data.error, then I'm going to dispatch one thing, right? So I'm going to use this to dispatch my error. So this right here, I'm going to make my type, if I can spell. Type is going to be search, and I'm just going to call it ERR. And then my payload, only because I want the error message so I can display this error message. So my error message here is going to be the res.data.error. right? Else, so if that doesn't exist, then I want to create a dispatch of a type success. So search successful. And then my payload, I want to be my res.data.results. Not res.config. Res.data.results. Right? So now, get out of here. What are you doing? What do you not like? Unexpected token in the index. Where's this at? What? Down here? I can just get rid of this altogether, but oh, I think I'm missing a. Am I missing that? There we go. All right. So if I do super main now, then I still get a failure, but it updates the correct thing. So now if I look in here in my state object, I should see that there's an, well, that's not the right one. Oh, I got 8 searches somehow. All for the same thing. So that, hold on, that should give me an error. Oh, I'm not doing, I haven't done anything with it yet. So the reason why it's not updating anything, I just lost my mouse. Where'd it go? There you go. All right, so then we have to go back to our roosters file here. And we have to do something with what we've created. Now we've created a search error and search success. So now we have to create a case to go with those, right? So case, I'm going to do search successful first. All right. And then I'm going to update whatever it is that I want to update from this. So I'm going to state, I'm going to change is loading is going to go to false. Let's see, what else I want to create, do. Is error is going to be false. The reason why I changed this here is that way, if there was an error, if I got an error before I got a success, then it's going to hold that error message in state, right? So I want to go ahead and clear that out and make this back false. And I also want to set the error to an empty string. That way it clears that out completely from my state store. I don't want it to save the fact that there was an error if there's not one anymore, right? And then I want to, what did I call this up here? Superheroes. I'm going to copy it because I can never spell it the same way twice. Copy. All right. And then I'm going to put that here. And then I'm going to update this with my action.payload. All right. And then the same thing, if I just wanted to be able to add this, like add these on to whatever I've searched before. So if I wanted to be able to search for Batman, then search for Superman and have all of those responses, then I could do the same thing like I did here and just spread open that array and add things to it. But I'm not going to do it that way, right? I want everything to have its own thing. The next piece to this is I have to do my failure, my error message, right? So I'm gonna do my case, search error. I'm gonna turn off this autosave because it slows my computer way down. And I'll just go back and save it all. All right, and then I'm gonna return my state here. And then my is loading, I'm still gonna make this false because I've still got something back. It's just an error this time, right? So my is error, I'm gonna make it true. My error, I'm gonna set to my action.payload, action.payload, and then I'm gonna leave my superheroes alone. That's a personal preference of mine. That way my screen doesn't go blank, because I've searched for something. I don't want it to update my superheroes array until I've gotten more or different data to put in there, right? Because if not, then I just end up with a blank screen and then I have nothing in there at all. Versus I had something there, now I have nothing, right? So now, if we search for something now, then we should have something. So if I do Superman and I hit search, so now if I look in here in my map state of props, I should have, all right, so I have superheroes is an array of two things because I get two objects back from my search, right? And then my searches array has one object in there and it's Superman. All right. So now I know that I'm getting the correct data back. And now I know if I put an E here, search, then, and I look at my map state of props, then now I have an error here saying that the character with the given name isn't found. And the reason why that's useful is because then you can come back into here. Let me move this right here down out of the way. Come on. All right. And then I can bring in my error. So I can say is error. And the way I would bring this in is just like everything else, state.shr.isError. All right. And then I can say, since this is here, I'm just going to put this below it here. I'm going to say props.isError. Oh, you know, I also need to bring in the error message. Error is going to be state.shr.error. All right, so props.isError, question mark. Then I want it to display I'm just going to give it a p tag, but I'm going to give it a class name of error. That way I can style it. And then I'm going to make this props.error. And then my closing p tag. And then if not, then I'm just going to give it a empty JSX tag. All right. So now if you notice, now I have this error, character with given name not found. So then it's there. So now if I have a success, then that should go away. And now I have success again. All right. Now I'm going to do it super quick. I'm not going to create custom components for it. I'm just going to do it in here. Let's see. So in here, in my app.js file here, I'm just going to put my superheroes. Superheroes is going to be state.shr.superheroes, right? And I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did with this loading thing here, except for I'm going to do it for my superheroes. And I'm going to say, if there are superheroes, then I want you to display this, right? So props.superheroes. All right. And then I want it to, I'm not going to do that way though. I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to have it check to see if there are superheroes. And then I'm going to have it map over those superheroes. Superheroes dot map, and then I'm just going to call sh. So for each superhero, I want to return. I'm going to do a div. Remember, you always have to do your keys. So I'm going to do a div with a key of sh.id. And then I'm going to do an sh.name because I know they all have names. And then that should give me something. As long as there's a superhero. All right. So now there's no superheroes, but let's see what happens if I type in Batman. So if I type in Batman, then now I get Batman, Batman, and Batman 2, right? So now if we go in here and we look in our object that we get back, where is that? Here. We get our object back. And we look in our superheroes. We'll just look at one of the objects here. We see there's an image. So if we want to get the image for him, then all we have to do is say that. So we're going to do this. I'm just going to go, I want an img with a source, which is going to be equal to sh.image.sr or URL, I think it is. URL. And now for every one of them, now we have a picture. All right. So what questions, I know it doesn't look like, it's not very clean, it's not anything like that, but what questions do you guys have? Console log, search, and actions. Is that what you wanted me to do, Kavya? Is that what you're asking? Here, yeah, I can let you guys unmute. I don't know how to do that. I guess I can just let everybody unmute. Oh, that was during the access issue. Okay. Yeah, I think everybody can unmute now. I'm not sure. But all right. So does anybody have any questions? My philosophy is so you have your component, then you have your actions, and you have your reducer. So for your component, that's where you figure out what data you need and what you want to display, right? So then you have to build out an action for that, which is where your actions file comes into play. And then once you build out the action for that, then you need to do something with that data. And so it's just a cycle. You figure out what data you need, you get the data, you do something with it, right? Then you figure out what data you need, you get the data, and then you do something with it. Like it's just a cycle. And that's why, to me, it's easier if you keep all of those files up at one time. That way you're not having to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, because that's where you get lost, especially in larger applications. It's more difficult to stay focused on whatever component that you're actually working in. VS Code is a little bit easier for me to work in. My computer does not like Code Sandbox for the most part, and I feel like I have more screen for whatever reason with VS Code, but yes. So all right. Jacob says, why is it important to do the API call in the actions folder? It's not that you necessarily have to do it in the actions folder, especially if you're using the use dispatch hook. You can do it from wherever you want to do it. What the good thing about the actions folder is that, again, it's a centralized location where everything can access that information at any time, and it's essentially stored. But you can do a use dispatch or use the dispatch hook wherever you want to use it, and I mean, you can do it that way. But it's the way I was taught, the way I've seen it, and the way the company I now work for does it, is it's all done in the actions folder. So and Kavi, you said, correct me, please. We always use payload to pass data along to action type. Correct. The action inside of here, this action right here is an object. This object has a type and a payload. So that's why. Now, this is all based on what you call it technically. Like if I called this type, or if I called this something else like typo, right? Then I would just have to make sure that every time that I did a dispatch, this right here was typo instead of type. So you're creating that object by doing this. If you have no payload, I think you guys can unmute. I think I made it so you guys could unmute. I'm not sure. I don't know if it mutes you. Like, I don't know how to let everybody unmute again since I muted everybody. But if nobody has any more questions, then I can go ahead and stop recording now. And then let's see, how do I can never figure this part out. Let's see. Oh, how do I? My computer's going super slow. Sorry. No. This is killing me. If you guys saw me fighting with my computer right now, you guys would be laughing. All right, so I'm gonna do this, and then I'm going to